Are you looking for an athletic scholarship? You're in the right place. This is the Recruit Me Athletic Scholarship Podcast, the longest running podcast on recruiting and athletic scholarships. We're here to help your family navigate the recruiting road all the way to an athletic scholarship. He's a recruiting expert and a dad of 2 college athletes. He has a wealth of experience to share. Here's Recruit Me CEO, Brent Hanks.
Welcome to episode 343 of the Athletic Scholarship Podcast. The Athletic Scholarship Podcast is a weekly recruiting education podcast that gives you 15 minutes each week that'll change your athletic scholarship future. The Athletic Scholarship Podcast is a resource under the Recruit Me company umbrella. Recruit Me and recruit-me.com provide you with many free and inexpensive recruiting resources that will help you direct your own recruiting journey without spending thousands of dollars. Today's episode 343, is part 2 of a 2-part interview with an ex-professional baseball player. He was also a pro scout and is now the dad of a college baseball player. This episode will go a little longer than the normal 15 minutes to give you as much helpful recruiting information that this parent gives. Last week, Brandon Mozley laid out his past baseball experience and then walked you through his son Blake's recruitment to Division I Missouri State University and then the transfer to Johnson County Community College. Also, he hits on how COVID and a coaching change affected Blake's decision to transfer. Go to your favorite podcast app and listen to episode 342 or go to the recruit-me.com website. Today we hit on more of Blake's journey, how his junior college helped him to get where he is now, Nebraska, and a lot of helpful information about junior colleges, name, image, and likeness information, and college offers. Let's jump into part 2 of this interview with Brandon Mozley. Some of the things that I kind of took away from you going through his the history of the recruitment and his college career so far is, with all your experience with baseball, playing professionally, being a scout, you were actually surprised whenever they showed interest in your 5'7", 140-pound son, and that kind of hits me. I think it tells a good story that you never know when it's going to happen, and even if you think you know what's going on, it's probably going to be different than what you had perceived what recruitment might be.
Yeah, I think because I always looked at Blake out of the scouting lens. I looked at him, instead of looking at him like he's my son, I looked at him like I was grading out a player as a scout, and I didn't think he was ready to be recruited. Well, these colleges did, and they liked him. And they liked how he carried himself. And so it really sped up the process for us. We were green. We didn't know what we were doing. He just started driving. I mean, he chose for himself the hometown team because he didn't want to have to deal with it. And he wanted it to be over and done with. We got a really good offer financially from a local school whose head coach wanted him. The head coach offered us. The head coach wanted him. The recruiting coordinator wasn't involved because the prior recruiting coordinator was the one who put Blake on the map. He liked Blake a lot, and he kept telling Coach Gutton, you better get Blake, the local kid, before he puts on weight and gets bigger. You better get him. So we dealt with that for about a year before they really offered him. And so Nate was telling Coach Gutton, get him before. I believe, I think, I don't really know what conversations were like, but Coach Gutton wanted Blake. He liked Blake. We loved Coach Gutton, still do. I think at the time the assistant coach wasn't really as high on Blake after Nate had left. So
well, and Parker went through some coaching changes in his career, and I've done a podcast about coaching changes and how you kind of have to be prepared and how that can change your situation. And then a new coach comes in and now you're not their recruit. And so sometimes they just don't, they want to get their people in. And that was probably the situation that Blake went through. You and Blake had the maturity to handle, say, let's just get out of this situation and go better ourselves. And like you said, Blake bet on himself, which was hard for a 20-year-old to do, isn't it?
Yeah, it's hard, but that's the decision he made, and I respected that. And I can honestly tell you, I don't know if I can even give you the words to explain what Johnson County did for him. We got our son back. Instead of us not hearing from him for a couple of days on the phone, and then when he did call, he couldn't talk because he was so unhappy. We got our son back. He was happy. He was loving it. And he was going to restaurants and hanging out with the team again. And, when he was at Missouri State, he got to a state of mind where right after practice, he wanted to be alone. He didn't want to have anything to do with baseball people or friends or anything like that. And then at Johnson County, he got all that back. He became himself again. That's the biggest piece for me that meant the most. And not to say that Missouri State did that to him. I'm not saying that, but for whatever reason, there was something there that there wasn't the joy that he had when he left.
That was in the COVID stuff too. So
listen, he's always had a great relationship with Coach Gutton. I've had a great relationship with Coach Gutton at Missouri State. Our relationships have not strained or anything like that. It's just Blake changed who he was as a person, and not in a good way. He wasn't going out and getting in trouble or anything. He just became secluded, and we didn't like that. The first week he was at Johnson County, I told my wife, I said, he's himself again. To be honest with you, it meant a lot.
Well, and to maybe clarify a little bit, you don't want to say it, but there was a coach that was changing a lot of things for him, and he got to go to junior college and, like you said, be himself. They weren't there to change his swing. He was a hitter, and Johnson County let him get his swing back, and he thrived doing that without changing to what somebody else wanted him to do that was not comfortable.
Yeah, they told him to be himself. When you're a hitter and somebody tells you to be yourself, then that gives you a lot of confidence.
One of the other things that I got out of there was whenever he put his name into the portal, whenever he was going to leave Missouri State, basically phone calls started coming. Was there anything that he did or you guys did other than just receive phone calls from his name in the portal?
Yeah, he got a few pretty good offers from some good schools that I don't know how they knew him. I really don't. He got some good offers from some bigger schools, which shocked me. Probably the best advice I've ever given him, and the only time he might have listened to me completely. I told him, I said, son, this portal and this COVID stuff is going to be a train wreck. I said, this is going to ruin rosters. It's going to ruin coaches' careers. It's not going to be pretty. I said, if you want my advice, go the junior college route like you had talked about. Don't even waver on it and just stick true to what you feel. I said, because you're going to be wowed by some of these offers in the next couple of weeks. These rosters won't be settled out for 5, 6, 7 years. And I told him, I said, so your gut instinct was to go to junior college, I would do that.
We've got basically another year or so of portal and the COVID stuff to kind of maybe play itself out here just a little bit.
Yeah, I don't even know if it'll be played out then, because now I think because of rosters being so weird, I don't think coaches know how to recruit the way they used to anymore. I think they're going after 7th and 8th graders and 9th graders because they're looking at rosters way down the road because they don't know what to do with their current rosters and still in the next couple of years again. I think it's really affected the way people are recruited. I think it's affected the way coaches look at kids. I don't know when it'll cycle through. You'd like be the high school seniors from COVID year that after them it'd be cycled through it, but I don't believe that. I think COVID ruined rosters, in my opinion, for 8 to 10 years, personally.
Another thing that I caught in your discussion is Blake talked to some guys that had come in to Missouri State from junior colleges and got to hear about their experience at a junior college. So, one thing that we suggest is to try to find ex-college athletes or current college athletes and talk to them when you're being recruited. So that's one of the things that he kind of bumped into, and it sounded like that helped him a little bit to make his decision.
Kids only listen to their parents so much, but they listen to their peers a lot. He had talking to 2 kids that had come from the junior college experience, and they loved it. And so that really helped him. It was great going to a Johnson County game, just knowing the competition was going to be good, but whether he went 0 for 4 or 4 for 4 in the second game of the doubleheader he was going to be playing, because those junior colleges, they thrive on getting their kids scholarships to 4-year schools. And so they throw the kids out there who need the 4-year commitment quicker than the next kid. And so, they're rebuilding rosters every year because they're trying to get kids to 4-year school every year. Just the way it played out, the way they handled the recruiting was so amazing. And I loved, not to repeat myself, but when that assistant coach decided to do weekly check-ins with Blake, really allowed Blake to have the freedom to have a whole week of playing baseball, 6 games in a week, which junior college does. It was great. He'd play his 6 games, and then on his off day on Monday, he'd go in and have his recruiting meeting with the coach, and the coach would say, these are the schools I talked to. These are the schools that are going to offer. Here's what they're going to offer. And then on Tuesday, when they'd have a doubleheader, he'd already be done with that meeting. Wouldn't worry about it and play baseball until the next Monday. And it was a great experience. It was perfect. It was handled the right way. And I love that. I told that coach, David Canary, after the season, I said, whatever Blake does the rest of his life, you will have a major impact on it because the way you handled this was exactly what he needed.
So was that something that they marketed or told Blake that they would do for him as he came into Johnson County, or is that just something that they did?
Yeah, we didn't really, it wasn't marketed to us for sure. But when the fall phone calls started and things started to happen, it kind of morphed into that because the coach had done it for other people in the past. And he came to me and Blake and he's like, hey, I can do this. And for us, it was a no brainer. Like, yeah, that'd be great. Not only would he talk to Blake on Mondays, but he was talking to schools throughout the whole week. And if they would call on another one of Blake's teammates and say, hey, tell us about this kid, the right-hand pitcher. Well, this coach would say, well, I've also got a second baseman who's already got 15 offers. And so the schools that were calling, the assistant coach had interest, but he was also putting interest out there to other schools who would call maybe on another player and say, hey, how do you have a middle infielder? Because I got one for you.
So is that something that a high school kid can maybe ask the JUCO program as they're kind of doing their research on junior colleges, or do you think that's a little bit too brash to ask?
No, I think anytime you can ask, say, hey, is there any way, when I come to school, if I commit to play junior college ball for you, is there any way we can meet once a week and go over what's happening with my recruiting process for the 4 years? I don't think that's too much to ask. And I think it shows those coaches too, if you're in high school, that you have an ultimate goal of going there, doing well and playing beyond that.
Also, you mentioned about all the college scouts that came to the games. Is that something you think the junior college marketed to get coaches there, or is it just because of reputation?
I think that Jayhawk conference is so good in junior college that maybe it starts with reputation, but word of mouth for college recruiters is always the biggest thing. If one guy hears that a guy's going to watch a right-hand pitcher, well, they don't want, for fear of missing out, they don't want to not be there. So they follow the leader. I think that's how that happens. It's that way in pro scouting and it's that way in college recruiting. If you hear that somebody's interested in a player, well, all of a sudden you're more interested than you were. It's kind of funny how that plays itself out, but that's how it happens. I would say this, that Jayhawk conference for junior college, the way they do it in the fall is like Blake at the very beginning of the fall, there was twice where he showed up to a junior college to play and he would play against two different teams for 5 innings at a time. And then the next day he'd play against two other teams for 5 innings at a time. So he would play against 4 teams, 20 total innings, and there'd be 4-year college recruiters at all 4 games, all 20 innings, because they wanted to see every pitcher they could. And so they would stay there for 2 days and watch this, and they would get to see 4 teams. To me, I was like, man, that's put together really well. These 4-year college coaches get to see 4 different teams. Actually, it was 6 because the way they ran it, but they get to see these teams for 2 straight days, and they got to get a good look at a bunch of different pitchers. It was ran really well. And then after that, those 2 weekends, then they played against a certain junior college. Double headers, always double headers. One game would be 9 innings, one game would be 7.
So being prepared, whether you're going to a 4-year school or a junior college, fall season is a big deal because that's when other coaches can see you because their schedule's going on during the spring. So really 4-year schools have more time to watch the kids during the fall season.
Correct. The head recruiter at most of your big schools during the fall, they'll miss practice with their team to go out and recruit. One of the places we showed up had rosters, grade point average, how many hours they had taken so far. I mean, it was amazing. It prepared those coaches to be able to make an offer to a kid and have a full screening of who they really were.
I'm excited to see Blake. Nebraska and the D1 season starts real soon. Do they get to travel here the first weekend to get out of the cold?
Yeah, they go to University of San Diego and they play 3 there. And then they go to Mobile, Alabama to play South Alabama. And then they play in that Dome Classic up in Minneapolis their 3rd week. I think Vanderbilt is there. Hawaii is there. And maybe Southern Miss, I think maybe. So that's his 3rd weekend. And then he opens up at home the following midweek, I think, against Creighton, I think. And then
Nebraska is a great sports town, and Parker got to play there. Unfortunately, he gave up a home run to a Cornhusker there, but we won't talk too much about that. It was a great experience, and looking forward to seeing Blake as a Cornhusker. Did you give a number of how many schools maybe were looking at him out of junior college as he made his decision into Nebraska, or do you even know?
Yeah, it was a lot. I mean, it was, again, he was putting up big numbers.
Tell us a
He,
little bit about the negotiation on, he was getting offers. Is it somebody, do they just come and kind of one up another school? Or is that something that Blake or you would say, hey, we're getting this offer from so-and-so. What can you do? And kind of imply that you're looking for a little bit more.
So it's funny. So when they would contact Blake before he turned it all over to his assistant coach, Blake didn't want to tell another school what another school was offering. I don't know what his reasoning was, to be honest with you.
Well, he's 20 years old, and that's hard to do for a 20-year-old.
He didn't want to do that. So I sat down with that assistant coach who said he would take it all over. I talked to him. He asked me the question, if these other schools ask what he's being offered at another school, can I tell them? And I said, yeah, you better make sure they know. Through that spring semester, before he committed to Nebraska, he'd get an offer on a Monday. And then when the following Monday rolled around and we'd be talking about it, this coach would say, well, so-and-so asked how much XYZ school is offering. And I told him. So he offered 10% more. And so we get constant updates like that. And so, yeah, it became like a negotiation. I will tell you this. The only time Blake talked money, because kids always think, well, mom and dad will pay for it, whatever I don't get. So the only time Blake talked money is he had that good series where all those college coaches were there. Nebraska had already offered him, but he had a great weekend in front of some big schools, and they were going to make good offers. And Nebraska knew that. They weren't dummies. And so they called Blake. They didn't call the assistant coach. This time they called Blake. And they said, we want you to be a Cornhusker. We don't want to miss out on you. We've already made an offer. You came to our school to visit. What do we have to do? And Blake, out of his own mouth, said, I need more money. And the next day he got it.
You don't have to answer this, but a lot of people think that baseball and other sports are going to get a full ride. So what is a good offer for a high-level Division I baseball player?
Well, I think that, the minimum offer you can get that they have to offer you is 20%. And so I think if you get 30, 40, 50%, that's a great offer, especially if you got good grades, because you can get money elsewhere. Blake committed to Missouri State, and I don't mind telling you, he got a 40% offer, but the other 60% we got paid for from local scholarships.
Right.
Both my wife and her mom were graduates of Missouri State. We got like an alumni scholarship, I don't remember what they call it, a continuing education alumni scholarship or something. When all was said and done, and he started his first day on campus, we didn't owe a red cent, but only 40% of that money came from baseball.
One of the myths is I'm going to play a college sport and I'm going to get a full ride scholarship. And unfortunately, we have to pop the balloon, say, no, you're probably not going to get a full ride athletic scholarship. Blake's a high level. So I just wanted my families to know that most sports, you're not going to get a full ride athletic scholarship.
There's ways that if you're willing to work and do things and write essays or whatever and there's other things out there. Blake, he went to Nebraska on a 70% scholarship. The other 30%, we've been very blessed. We don't know Nebraska either because the other 30% came from other things.
Right.
He got a little academic money, but he got he was blessed that he got a small NIL package from a local company that he went out and chased on his own, and it covered the rest of it. So,
well, great. I'm going to have to get on and have him do a shout out for Recruit Me and then pay him like, what was it, $20 or something?
Yeah. What's really cool is and I think some other schools are doing this. University of Nebraska set up his own fan page. I forget what they call it, but you can click on his link through
it's
his
called open doors, or
I don't know. I honestly don't know. You would know more than me. People can click on this and he'll send a happy birthday shout out to a local kid from number 28 at University of Nebraska, Blake Mozley, and he gets $20. They'll click on a link where he shows up to the birthday party for $100. All these things he can do, send an autographed photo. The school set up themselves. And so it teaches him business too, which is really good. Like he's got teammates who push themselves every day to make that extra money. And then there's guys like Blake who will do it every now and then. And then there's guys I'm sure who don't do it at all. No matter which option you choose, the school set it up. And he's got his own page. It's got pictures of him in his Nebraska uniform, and he can do local appearances. and make a little extra money. Yeah, he went to a local furniture store on a weekend where they're doing a furniture sale, and they found it on the website. I think he made like $500. It's pretty cool that he's learning that side of it, how to market himself, how to talk, how to look somebody in the eye, and because baseball is going to be over. He's got this year and next year, and his baseball career will be over. And I think that he's learning these other things is really good.
Well, it's 64 degrees here in Ozark, Missouri, and I think you and I have maybe a 2 or 4 hour meeting that we need to go to later this afternoon.
Hit him straight.
So I'm going to ask one more question. Is there any advice that you want to give, just a couple pieces of advice you want to give to maybe some high school students or maybe even some JUCO players on recruiting that maybe you picked up with Blake as you went through the process?
Yeah, I think for me as a parent, my advice to parents would be put your pride aside. I think because I experienced baseball at a high level, I worked for a pro team for a long time. I played professionally. I had aspirations for my son that he should start at a big school. He should be an all-conference player as a freshman. It was wrong of me. It was too much for him to handle, and it was my pride. Even when he hit the portal after COVID, my pride still wanted him to accept one of those bigger school offers, and so I was able to sit back and think about it and say, you know what, go to junior college. And I think that as a parent, I've met a lot of parents there at the Marucci Training Center, and I talked to them, and I think it's easy to fall in love with keeping up with the Joneses. And so my advice for parents, put your pride aside, because their happiness matters more than the billboard that you get to say, my son is going to this school, because that only lasts for 5 days.
Well, and I don't know that I ever told you this, but I remember Parker coming home and saying, we have 2 sophomores that have committed to a Division I, and I can't get anybody to look at me. And I think Parker was going into his senior year. So Blake and Carson's recruitment lit a fire under Parker to get after it a little bit in a good way, because he was waiting for somebody to come and see him play. And that basically sparked him to say, let's go out and let's contact some coaches and tell them who I am.
On the parent side, I wrote a long essay about parenting and sports. I think as a parent that we want what we want because we want to brag on our kids. And I think what our kids want is just to be happy. Blake's first go around in Division I, he was playing the game every day to stay in the lineup. Yeah, he was doing just enough to stay in the lineup, and when he went to Johnson County, he started trying to hit the ball over the trees. It was just a complete change in mindset, and it affected, his numbers in a good way.
He's competing against, you got a 19-year-old competing against 22-year-olds.
Correct.
That's what makes JUCO a good option for a lot of people, because you get to actually compete against another 19 and 20-year-old, and instead of you're basically a freshman in high school again, or maybe an 8th grader trying to make the varsity squad.
And the good thing about junior college is if you're a hitter, you're going to get at bats. If you're a pitcher, you're going to get innings. And if you go to a Division I school as a pitcher, for example, and you can't crack that rotation or be a weekend guy, you may go through a whole semester and only throw 15 innings.
Right.
And
well, we thought Parker's freshman year, if he got 15 to 20 innings, we were going to be tickled to death. And he got 40, I think 36, right, actually. He went in there and performed his fall semester, the fall season, and then through strike. But you've got to understand that you may not play very much your freshman and sophomore year, and that's hard to do.
Well, it's hard on your development. If you're not out there playing, you don't get developed. Yeah, I'm huge on the development, and junior college offered that, so it was great.
Thank you to Brandon Mozley for sharing all the great information about Blake's journey. There are so many nuggets of information in both Part 1 and Part 2 of this interview. Email me, Brent@recruit-me.com, if you have any comments or questions about the interview. More player and parent coaches interviews are available at recruit-me.com, along with a sign-up for the free Recruiting Power Pack, a free Recruit Me monthly newsletter, and the $39 Recruit Me 3.0 Athletic Scholarship System. Join me next week for another episode of the world's longest-running recruiting education podcast, the Athletic Scholarship Podcast.